Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to another edition of Stars, Stripes, and Anfield Nights. With me this evening, from my end, I have Dan, CT, and Toby. A big welcome to Toby, new on the channel. I'll start with you. How you doing today, Toby?
I'm doing good. I'm glad to be here. Obviously the first show with y'all, and I'm very excited to talk a little bit about Liverpool football.
100%. Dan, how you doing tonight?
Oh, I'm just managing, Drew. Like I already said in the chat, I had my gym workout today. I had dinner. I'm just chilling right now. Ready to talk some fun stuff like contract renewals and financial regulations with UEFA.
Yes, definitely some fun topics for our international break period. But I think we actually have a few interesting ones to talk about. So makes the international break at least a little less dull. But CT, how you doing tonight?
Yeah, I'm well, as always. Thanks for allowing me on your American platform or show. But no, we're all Reds, and it's a pleasure to have Toby here as well. Glad you could join us, and look forward to talking about the latest topics tonight, and with the chat as well. Shout out to everyone watching on YouTube and X watching us.
I just realized we have the whole United States and then in Aussie. So we have East Coast, Central, and West Coast. We have Massachusetts, Texas, and California. And then, wait, CT, you're in Melbourne or Sydney?
Melbourne, yeah.
Melbourne, yeah. So we have the entire continent of the United States and then Australia.
Yeah, I mean, I count CT as like LA, at least a brother since he lived out here for a while. So
that's it. That's
definitely,
it.
Yeah. But yeah, one thing that connects us all right now is international duty, and I'm assuming our at least frustration over the timing and the amount of international breaks. But we'll get into that a little later. The first thing I'll pick up on tonight is we'll start with some good news. New deal for Quansah. So I was looking at it. I didn't see any details revealed about the deal other than that it was a extension on his original contract, probably a pay bump in that. And for me, the things that I pulled out were the comments on Quansah's new deal. So he was saying that I couldn't be happier at this minute. I think the way the new manager has come in, his coaching style has definitely been a massive part of that. And I think it's the best club in the world for me to develop and become a better player. So for me, reading that, it was very good to see from Quansah because I thought it was pretty harsh that he was pulled out on that first game. Understandably, Slot made his decisions, was not afraid of making tough decisions or picking the right players at the right time. But I was worried about Quansah's potential development in the squad and if he'd be interested in potentially moving on. But this new deal says otherwise, and his words speak highly about the manager and the club moving forward. So, Toby, how important do you think it was that we secured Quansah to a new deal?
Yeah, I think it's pretty important. Considering that Virgil Van Dijk is on the last year of his contract. Yeah, I do believe. I think Liverpool do think that he's the future. There's probably some development that he needs to, or some things he needs to work on per se. But yeah, I think it's great for both sides. It shows that the ownership, coach, have faith in him that he can develop and that he can progress into a future starting center back for Liverpool.
Definitely. And Dan, how quickly do you see that progression for Quansah? Do you see him getting back into the first team this season, or do you think it's something that will develop over time as more of a first team player?
I do think it's going to be something that happens over time because Kanate, he's doing a great job filling in. I do agree it's kind of harsh that Quansah was replaced after halftime against Ipswich, but ever since Kanate came in, he's been killing it, man. He's been killing it. So I don't see exactly how Quansah gets in with Kanate playing as well as he has, and Van Dijk being the GOAT that he is. So I do think it's just going to be it's something that's going to take time, but I think it will happen eventually.
Yeah, Kanata has definitely stepped up, and it's his position to lose. Hopefully, he stays fit. But
Mhm.
Dan, what do you think about I guess the priority of these new contracts? I'm gonna go to you for this one because you have the hottest details about all the financials behind this. But do you think it makes sense that Quansah's deal was done first and rumors are Konate's are next before the big deals of Trent, Virgil, and Salah potentially come through?
Yeah, because they're going to be the pace setters. So whenever Van Dijk, Trent, or Salah are offered, we don't know what they're being offered right now. If there's obviously beyond years, it's going to be base wage. So right now, I think Van Dijk's going 220, 250, and Trent's close to Van Dijk, and Mo Salah, for all intents and purposes, is on 350 grand a week, more or less. And a lot of Mo's contract is actually tied into media rights. There's a whole Harvard course on this they came out with 2 years ago. But this is where the difficulties of these types of deals lie in. Quansah and Konate are the most important to start because they are the ones that their contract's gonna be up soon. I think Konate's is on 1 year next year, so he needed to get done now because whatever the final wage structure is going to look like, these are players in their early to mid 20s. I think Konate is now 25. Jarell Quansah is 21, I believe, off the top of my head, 2021 now. So getting them tied down to long-term contracts this early with their base pay and their bonuses already put in allows them to not bloat those contracts out to bloat those contracts too high. If say, Van Dijk gets 300 grand or Trent gets 300 grand a week, which I imagine that they'll probably ask for something close to that or close to what Salah got in his last pay raise. Because, if Ibrahima Konate sees that Van Dijk's getting 300, he's going to say, well, I'm worth, 180 or 200. And I think right now he's on like 80, 90 or 100. So by doing theirs first and giving them more security, obviously a raise in their base pay, and also their bonus incentives, which is what Liverpool contracts are famous for, is that they really, really make up for the being not as high as base salary as other teams with their bonus structure. That gives them the protection that they don't have to renegotiate those contracts from a weaker position where they've already paid Van Dijk, Trent, and Salah. Now the problem is the fact that with Quansah and Konate getting these contracts, how much room do they have to work with for other renewals? But they're the most important because they're the most valuable assets at the club, regardless of what everybody else thinks in the chat. They are the most financially valuable. Like Quansah, Konate are, 50, 60, 70 million pound center backs. If Lenny Euro is a 50, 60 million pound center back, you could easily argue that Ibrahima Konate and Jarell Quansah are as well. So it's good they're getting them done early. I think Toby already mentioned it. Quansah, we did very, very well last year when we all thought he was very raw. He obviously has only played very limited time this year after the Ipswich game. He did not have the best first half, and Slot was very ruthless. He's like, all right, you're coming out. Konate's going in. I think we'll see more of Jarell Quansah as the year goes on. I think Slot rates him very highly. I think his on the ball playmaking ability is the closest thing we have to maybe a Van Dijk or a Matip, and his ability to both dribble and pass. So we're going to see Quansah come back. I'm not really worried about that. And if they can get these done now, then for me it gives them much more control over the Van Dijk, Trent, and most situation where they can now pick and choose who they want to sign and not have it like completely break the wage structure at Liverpool.
Yeah, definitely. CT, before I ask you the question, I just want to touch base on in the chat. I see, Jay, you asked the question about the schedule coming back from the international break. We'll definitely address that later in the stream. Appreciate you getting the comments in. Same with you, Jay Muse, as always. We'll discuss the Frankfurt striker later on the stream as well. And everyone watching, we definitely appreciate everyone tuning in each week. If you have any questions or want to put a comment in the chat, please do, and we'll pull them up. Now, CT, Dan talked about laying the. I don't want to use this phrase, but it's what's coming to me: laying the pipe for the future of the Liverpool team with Quansah and Konate. Do you see them as the future of Liverpool's center back partnership? And we'll touch on Van Dijk after this, but is this something that's going to come sooner than you think? And how important was it for you to get the Quansah deal done and potentially the Konate coming in the next few days?
Yeah, look, it was just super important in terms of just for morale and I think momentum. I think like a lot of people have mentioned, things can snowball either way. You sign one guy, it could lean to more guys signing, and it's just healthy that way, I feel. And so and future planning, like as Dan and Toby mentioned, obviously we're in this position. It's bad. It's not ideal with the three other guys, and there was mitigating circumstances that factored in with that. But just for Hughes to, I give him a clean slate because this is his first year. And, based on the window, you could have some concerns from that. But, getting to work and putting his stamp on things is important for Edwards and him. I think they're going to be a lot more organized in regards to, future renewals. And this is a great start. So, yeah, in terms of that, I'm happy. In terms of your question about could this be a future pairing and could this be sooner rather than later? I think there's a chance. I think Quansah starting in the first game at Ipswich tells you that Slot has seen enough and that he knows he's got qualities, and he appreciates the qualities that he brings, and he has no hesitation starting him in his very first game as manager. So that tells you all you need to know. But then it also tells you the fact that he was, willing to put Konate in, straight away as a replacement shows you that, he knows the qualities of Konate as well. So I think that has the makings of, a really strong partnership for the future. I haven't really seen enough of Nallo, and I know there's a lot of raps. Maybe Jay in the chat and anyone watching can let us know your thoughts on what you've seen or heard from Nallo. But I think when we got him, that seemed to be a coup, poaching him from when we got him in the academy as well. So he's one for the future to continue to develop as well. And then we continue to hear links about Branthwaite and other names, Bastoni and other names that popped up. So I wouldn't say that this is like set in stone, but I feel like they'll probably bring in a third centre back to compete with Quansah and Konate, for the future pairing.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting to see with all the rumors we're getting. I know we've talked about it before on the channel, the probably necessity for a left-footed center back that could play left back, but be curious to see what slot goes ahead, especially with FSG as well, with tend to be on the leaner side in terms of expenditures. They normally buy their man and don't go for superfluous players, and Quansah definitely is a added high quality player to our arsenal to choose from. But Toby, I'll save you from this question right now because it's a tough one, and I'm going to give it to Dan as we move to the contract situation with Trent, Virgil, and Salah. Dan, what do you think is going on there? I know you touched on that briefly with getting the Quansah and Konate deals done first to potentially not upset and set the pathway for those contracts. Who do you think's the most important to get the deal done after Konate and Quansah's been done? And can we afford to lose anyone? If so, who?
Oh goodness. So to summarize for all the viewers, if they're not aware or maybe they knew and forgot, UEFA changed the rules for their financial fair play, where this year all clubs registered for UEFA competition, Champions League, Europa League, Conference League, have to have a minimum of 80% wages to turnover. Now that wages to turnover includes stuff like player wages, coaches' wages, transfer fees, and agents' fees. So you cannot have more than 80%. Next year, it's going to be 70%. Now, the rules in the Premier League are 80%, but you wait for starting next year's competition, 2025 to 2026, is going to be 70%. Right now, Liverpool are kind of on the edge. I believe last year they were 71%, and this year they're roughly around 67%. Most of this has already been written about by Swiss Ramble, which if you don't follow Swiss Ramble on Substack or Twitter, follow them. Read over their articles. It's wonderful if you have the money to do that. I'm not sponsored by Swiss Ramble. It's just if you want to understand football finance, they're a really, really good way of breaking it down. The problem is the fact that if Liverpool, so the problem right now is twofold. It's length of contract and obviously it's pay increase and bonuses. So for Virgil and Mo, let the two other players first. Mo right now is on 350 grand a week, like I mentioned before. This is his last big contract at a big club, so he's probably looking for a bit of financial security and potentially a pay increase. Though I think you could talk him out of the pay increase. The problem is that he's probably not going to take a reduction. So Mo right now is gobbling up around 18 million a year, so to speak. Virgil right now is on around 200, 220. And again, he's probably looking for something closer to Salah, maybe not equal to Salah, but closer to it as well. Now, that increase for Virgil's contract would be somewhere around 130 grand a week, essentially somewhere close to about a 60 to 70% pay increase to his wage. Trent is also around 200 as well, and he's probably looking for that wage as well, but again, close to maybe 5 to 6 year contract. So essentially, you're looking at potentially increasing your wage bill by around, let's roughly guesstimate it to around 16 million pounds if Virgil and Trent both get extensions and Mo is on roughly the same money. Now, the good news is that you could potentially make up that gap with the wages you saved on Thiago. But the problem is that if you do that, then you're not going to be able to register. You're not going to be able to sign new players in the summer. That because of the way the finances are structured, you may not be able to make as many signings next year as you would otherwise want to do. Now, that does go down every year with amortization. Obviously, agents' fees are capped now, so there's a little bit more predictability to it. But essentially, you're at a position right now where there's not a lot of wiggle room that Liverpool have. Again, probably about 3 to 5% of their turnover to revenue to play with, which I believe is somewhere between, I think they're around 5. Give me 1 second. I'm going to do the math real quick. For 592, so around 5% of that is 30 million. They have about 30 million gap to play with, more or less, with wages and with transfer fees and agents fees next year, assuming they don't sign anyone. Assuming they sign all 3 of these players and max up that cap, or they don't sell anyone on, which I imagine they'll still sell more players on. So that's kind of the delicate situation they're in right now, that in order to keep the squad competitive, they're going to have to walk a very thin line. Now, if Salah leaves, you free up 18 million. 18 million of Liverpool's revenue is around, give me 1 second, is around 3%. So they would save 3% on their turnover to revenue that they could play around with potentially in transfers, wages, and agents fees. Again, the way amortization works with that is a little bit finicky. So obviously we spent a lot of money over the past couple of years. As the amortizations go down, you free up more money to spend on wages, which is what Liverpool have traditionally done. The point here I'm trying to make is that Liverpool don't have a lot of money to work with, mostly because of the financial regulations of UEFA and not because of the money they're bringing in. Now, with all that being said, the one player Liverpool need to sign is Trent, in my opinion. And it's not because Trent is potentially the best player, but he's the long-term future. So he's the one you need to figure out in terms of those wages. So for me, if you can sign anyone, sign Trent. And I would say you'd have to let Salah go just because of the wages that he commands. Now, what you could do, and this may be where Liverpool are leaning towards, you could sign all 3 of them and sell one on. So let's say you sign Salah, you sign Virg, and you sign Trent, like you did with Fabinho and Henderson, and then in the summer you sell them on for maybe a reduced price. So Salah, you sell to, let's say you sell them to PSG for like 40 million or 35 million. And, people will look at that and say, oh, why did you sell him for such a cheap price? But you're saving on the wages and you're recouping the fee. You're recouping more revenue into your coffers for signing new players because you have to maintain that ratio. It also makes sense if you think about the transfer window we just had, why they sold Carvalho, Vandenberg, and Clark and loaned Bajcetic, and they're selling as many players as they can, because that increase in revenue and that decreasing in wages allows them to have more wiggle room. That's how they actually got from 71%, I think, to 67% this year. Again, these are all at different time periods. It's not a real time number, so it may be a little bit lower than that right now, or maybe a bit higher in terms of wages to turnover. But this is where we're going to see that approach of they're going to have to be very, very particular on who they re-sign. So for me, that's who I think that they need to re-sign is Trent. They could sign all three, though if they sign all three, they're going to have to cut their claw somewhere. They're going to have to sell someone. They're going to have to loan someone out. They're going to have to figure out they're going to have to figure out some other things, which is why this is not a fast process. It's not as easy as I think how we imagine it, where ask them what they want, pay them what they want, get them signed up, because there are so many other cascading things that are going beyond this. This is why the Quansah and Konate deals are more important, because if you can maintain that wage structure and you have a much clearer image of what you have to play with in the market, again, 30 million, let's say it's around 30 million pounds more or less to your maximum wages of turnover next year, then you can kind of say, we need to figure out who gets what of this pot. And then if Salah leaves, we get more of that money back. So I know it's a bit of a long-winded sideline to this, but this is why this process has not been as straightforward as we all would like it to be. And I know some people may talk about who's to blame for this. This is just a byproduct of a lot of things happening at one time. It's easy to blame FSG, lack of planning, Mickey Edwards or Julian Ward or Jurg Schmadtke. But the problem is the fact that this was always a problem that was going to happen down the road. And there were just so many other immediate problems they had to figure out, from the manager to who the new sporting director and where they're going to sell the club. So sorry about that for that long-winded answer, Drew. I hope we all learned something today, in the sense that this was just this is a very complicated procedure. And I think we don't always appreciate the complexity of the problem that they're going to have to deal with or have been dealing with since the summer.
Yeah, definitely appreciate you going over all that, Dan. And I wanted to ask you that because I do think it's like very important to understand that breakdown, because I feel like I've been frustrated, and I know a lot of fans have been before, about FSG not just giving players what they want or signing them down, getting the deals down. Now, we talked about this in our Liverpool chat, where also Klopp leaving definitely doesn't help for signing players on for longer term contracts, especially like Trent, Salah, Virg, when Liverpool knew that was, I think, in November, and didn't release a statement until later or earlier this year. So there was like so much behind the scenes that was going on top of that, all the financials that Dan so graciously broke down for us. And if you didn't catch all of that, definitely go back and listen to Dan's breakdown, because it's explaining why these contracts are taking longer than we thought, and how we potentially might not see all three signing as much as we want that to be the case. So, Toby, now that I asked Dan the hardball question of who's most important and who does he think could leave, I believe it was Trent and Salah, making the most sense for him. Where do you sit on that question? Who do you think is most important for us to secure down, and who out of the three do you think is most expendable?
So yeah, the one player I believe is most important to sign is I'm gonna go with Dan here is Trent Alexander. He is part of the core of the team, or one of the core players of our team. Like, we are planning to build our future around him, right? He's vice captain right now, and potentially could be a future captain for the team, as long as he chooses to stay. As far as like expendable players go, sheesh, man. Man, I would love to keep all three. Don't get me wrong. Sheesh, maybe Salah. To be honest with you, Salah. He played a position that is pretty physical. Pretty requires a lot of, what's the word I'm looking for? A lot of running, a lot of shit. Excuse me. I mean, yes, I'm just gonna say Salah because it's just the position he plays, and it requires a lot more energy, a lot more effort than other positions.
Yeah, it's definitely his. We were talking about this in the chat. I know Steven was on the side of like the shelf life, and I know Dan mentioned that earlier. It's like Trent, you sign him, he's going to be in his prime for the next 6 years, arguably, potentially longer. Whereas you can't guarantee Salah and Virgil Van Dijk continue at the form they're at the levels they are for that long. Even though they haven't shown signs of regressing yet, just the long term bet backs Trent. So definitely agree with you there. For me, I'm gonna throw in. I actually do think this, not just to be contentious, but I do think Virgil Van Dijk's probably our most important player to tie down for at least the next 2-3 years. I think that like the stats of when we're missing a player, again, something we were talking about in our chat was that when Salah's out at AFCON, players stepped up. When Allison's been out, Kelleher's stepped up. Trent's been out. Bradley stepped up. And not saying that we have the same, they do the same job, the players that have replaced or filled in for those absences, completely erase the memory of the players that they're replacing. But for me, Van Dijk, when he was out, that was like our worst time. And when he was not at his best, that was when we dropped the most points. So that's why for me, I think Van Dijk, at least getting him for another 2-3 years is absolutely essential for helping with that transition in the back line. Because I don't know if Andy Robertson has that same shelf life. Tsimikas, I don't know if he's the future there. So we definitely need to have some work on the defense. Whereas I'm not as worried about Salah leaving. I think that we potentially, Chiesa is kind of that stopgap if he works out, and then we definitely invest if Salah left. But CT, I'll let you wrap it up. Are you gonna side with Dan and Toby, or do you have another opinion on the matter?
Yeah, I mean, they make such compelling cases, so it's hard to disagree. But yeah, you could. I think we've all said this before, but you can make cases for every single player, and like Toby, was obviously letting us know his thoughts on it that we hadn't heard in the past about that each player is being a tough decision. I think Salah is a player that we've shown that we can find ways to contribute to the score sheet when he's out. And he has lost he has lost his pace, and he scores goals different ways now than he used to, and he also is a key distributor and a facilitator as well. He's a guy who helps other players score as well. But I feel like out of the three, he is probably the most replaceable. Out of the three, if I have to pick one. But yeah, again, you can make cases for all, but I think Virgil still has. I agree with everyone that he still has several years left and at a higher level. I think maybe he might call it a day internationally after the next World Cup, because he has been very vocal about the stress and the schedule on his body and all of that, and the demand. He is sort of one of the leading players flying that flag about the case going on with FIFA. But I think he really loves representing his nation. But I could see the next World Cup cycle him sort of calling it a day, because it's an emotional toll and physical toll on his body. But I could still see with Liverpool, there's that hunger there. I could still see him really smile. And when he got presented the awards at the League Cup and the most recent match on the weekend, when Gakpo gave him the award, I could still just see that hunger for him to continue with Liverpool for many years. So I'll be really surprised if no contract gets done with Virgil. I think it would be a real breakdown in vision or in finances for that to not get done. Trent's the most trickiest deal to get done, I think, like Dan's mentioned and people in the past about where he's at in his career. It's very non-straightforward in terms of years and bonuses and all those things attached. And then Mo, I feel like, you know, he's lobbied to want to stay as well by offering his thoughts on Sky Sports and saying that his daughter is like a Scouse now and speaks with an accent and all of those things. So it's really a tough one to see a Liverpool Football Club without either of these three people, like either of these three human beings, these players, beyond this season. Like, losing Klopp was the granddaddy of them all, but you know, it's hard to envision a Liverpool team without any of these three players. But I think next season it's probably more likely that we don't see Mo more than the others, because I think there's the Saudi interest. He could walk into any other club on a free, and who wouldn't sign him? You know.
Yeah, I completely agree, and hopefully we don't have to see any of them go. But I think if contracts aren't nailed down by January, it's going to be a very nervy period, as we talked about before. Definitely want to take this moment right now again to just thank everyone who's watching, everyone who joins in on these streams each week. We really appreciate you tuning in. If you do have any comments or questions, please put them in the chat. And if you want to answer the question of who do you think is most valuable to nail down to a contract out of Trent, Virgil, and Salah, please throw that in the chat as well, and we'll bring that up. Dan, going back to you, moving on to injuries and international duty. Something I was reading is that Nunez his ban has been temporarily lifted. I didn't quite get the whole details on that, but he is traveling, joining up with Uruguay, and he's going to play during this international break. Alexis McAllister is also traveling, although he might not play for Argentina's first game. I personally was hoping that they'd stay back in Liverpool and get that rest and recuperation. At this stage of the season, we're already seeing so many teams pick up injuries. You know, Man City is a big one with Rodri. You know, we picked up a few. Allison is a big one, which we'll touch on after this. What are your overall thoughts on international breaks happening this frequently, and do you have any fears over the injuries that they could potentially cause?
Oh yeah, I mean, you know, the problem with being a elite football club with elite football players is that they're going to play for their countries more often than not, unless you're Sir Alex Ferguson and you can manipulate the teams to keep your players, your top players home. It's like, no, he's got an injury, you know, we can't send him out. So with Nunez, I actually think for Darwin, the best thing for him right now is to actually go and get game time with Uruguay. I think he's had enough time to be coached by Arne Slot. I think every time he's played under Arne, he's been pretty solid. I think at times people's evaluations of what Slot thinks about Darwin Nunez is overblown, to say the least. I obviously think that Slot rates him, but he's trying to win games of football right now. And he's saying, this is working for me right now. This is our plan. This is what we're going to go with. Now, as this season progresses, that plan is going to change. And I think that's something we have to appreciate and take into account. So Darwin going to Uruguay, I think, is only a good thing. And Marcelo Bielsa seems to have a good relationship with him. And I think for Darwin right now, the biggest thing is just keeping his confidence up and giving him that hunger and that desire, because he's just a young guy who, I mean, he's in his mid-20s, but he has a family, you know, he has a wife. He went through a whole ordeal over the summer with the Copa America. You know, him having that belief, I think for me is the most important thing, because when Darwin Nunez buys into Darwin Nunez more than anybody else, I think that's when we'll see him explode as a footballer. Maybe not like to the level of Erling Haaland, but, you know, when he's confident, you get those chips versus Brentford where, you know, it's the most audacious, ridiculous thing you can do. And, you know, we just love that madness from him. With McAllister, Alexis McAllister. This is the problem with being Alexis McAllister. Is that Alexis McAllister is the second most important player at Argentina behind Lionel Messi, because the reason Argentina win that World Cup with Messi is because McAllister is doing the running of Lionel Messi for him. And the reason I'm mentioning them both in the same breath is because you have to think of Alexis McAllister as that important to both Liverpool and to Argentina. I do think that there's too many international breaks between domestic games, and that's just the byproduct of the fact that these players are just playing way too much football. You saw with Rodri, the fact he's already snapped his leg. Jay Muse is mentioning his thing as well. See, Jay Muse, the thing is that Jota also has a terrible pass completions percentage, and there are games where Nunez's percentage is up and down. My point is not that, with Darwin, is not, you don't need to look at his pass completion stats to see he's doing what Arne Slot wants him to do in terms of the pressing, in terms of causing havoc. I mean, Bologna is a good example of that, where on paper his stats look terrible, but if you look at what he's doing for that first half, he is doing everything that Arne Slot wants Diego Jota to do. And Jota also is not always the most complete center forward when it comes to passing, receiving the ball. International breaks, yeah, they're playing way too many games now, and there needs to be something said for having more breaks for players, especially now with more financial regulations coming in, because you can't carry as many big squads with players paid as how high they're paid now. So there has to be a breaking point somewhere. I know Rodri mentioned that the players are potentially going on strike. I think that we might see a situation where a lot of players either refuse to play for their country or refuse to play for their club. And honestly, if I'm being honest, they should just refuse to play for the Nations League. I mean, the problem right now, really, with the way it's set up is the fact that UEFA invented the Nations League Cup, which is a useless friendly tournament that, the international managers are competing for. So I think that's what we're going to need to get this changed and to eventually force the governmental bodies of the world to actually address and think of player welfare and not just their bottom line, which is a very hopeful thing to think of, people in power caring enough about the people that they ostensibly represent. But it's really going to have to come down to that in order to address these things going forward, because Klopp's mentioned it for years, Pep's mentioned it for years, the players are mentioning it now. It's going to come to a head eventually. I just think that I just worry that the solution they come up with is that they just relax the financial regulations and just say, oh, okay, you want to do this more? Well, we'll keep the financial regulations, but you can deregister players and then you don't have to account their wages in your financial reports. And that would be a whole other thing as well. They'll most likely decide on the easiest way where it doesn't actually cut into any of the revenue, like less games. They'll just allow for more outside spending, or they'll not take into account bonuses or vacation time and vacation pay into their books. So a player that's needs a rest can just go on vacation for 3 months, and then you don't have to register them in your books. Sign a new player, bring them in, recycle. My point being is that I'm imagining a world where they address the situation in the worst possible way, like they've done since, like UEFA and FIFA have done since pretty much COVID.
Yeah, it's certainly coming ahead, and totally agree with you what you said with Darwin. I believe as well that he needs game time. I think going with Bielsa, exactly what you said, will be good for him, help him with his confidence. But yeah, I'm wondering on the international breaks if it's going to be something that clashes domestically, where owners of clubs and managers finally throw down the gauntlet. Like, I can't imagine Pep, let's say Holland gets injured with Norway or something like that, Pep taking that lightly, or any top club having that.
So, Drew, what are your thoughts on Darwin? Because you were a forward, weren't you? I know Jay was. You were a forward too, or are you?
For him?
You were a forward striker.
Oh yeah. I was a winger though.
So I mean, obviously we've debated this the other time, and people have certain viewpoints of this. Do you think Darwin will work with Arne Slot, or do you think they're going to have to go into the market and potentially address that position?
I don't think we have to do that right now. I think he needs to find his feet, his confidence. Like, for me, that's the most worrying thing, is that his highs and lows, like his highs are just incredible. And that's what, when you see that, you can see that potential player he is if he finds that consistency. but I haven't seen a player in the team who just drops his head as much as Darwin does when it's not going well for him. So for me, that shows support and then self confidence. But he has everything in his locker to play well. I don't think he needs to be as intricate a passer as, say, like a Cody Gakpo on the wing or a Diaz or a Salah. I think if he keeps it simple and then brings his attributes to the table, as you mentioned, the pressing, the running in behind, his finishing, those are all what we bought him for. So we weren't trying to replicate Roberto Firmino with him. And if he can get all of that right, I don't know. It could be with us. I hope it is with us, but it might just be one of those cases where player just doesn't fit in and he has to move on. So I'm down to give him this year to sort it out. I don't think we need to replace him, but certainly not this year. Maybe it's a conversation at the end of the season, but I do still back him to pull it through because I think we will need him to show up, and if he takes that chance, then it can be a very exciting rest of the year. But Toby, I'll give you just your thoughts on international break because we haven't had you on the stream before. Most of us are not a huge fan of how many international breaks there are. But that being said, it can be a huge source of pride and honor for players to play for their country and represent their country. What are your feelings about the international break and around injuries? Right now, we have Allison out, who we're still awaiting scan results. So it's most likely to miss Chelsea. We're not sure how late it could go at this point. It's a huge blow, but who would be your one player to wrap in wool and not have injured from this international break as well?
Yeah, so you can add me to that list of fans that don't like international breaks. I find them eerily frustrating that they happen as frequent as they do. To be quite honest, I don't follow too much international football. Most of us are from the States. We all know that the U.S. men's national team hasn't been really appeasing to
They get
watch.
Pochettino. We did get Pochettino though, which will be good.
We did. I have my concerns, but we'll see what happens. Too early to tell. But I do agree with a lot of fans, even the players. I have this concern with players that since they're playing so many games, right, they're more prone to injuries. And like with Alexis McAllister, for example, he's been dealing with that abductor injury for how many weeks now, or for a little while now. And so I kind of wish that he would have just said, "Hey, I want to sit this international break out, try to manage the injury thing or whatever." But yeah, I find international breaks to be very frustrating. It just messes with the flow, messes with the season, and just all the games, man. There's a lot of soccer games, for the players, even for fans to an extent. It's a lot for us to keep up with. Um, as far as like Nunez go, I do share the same opinion as Nunez. I do think the international break would be a good time for him to find his form, to get a little playing time. I was doing some research on this a couple days ago, and Jota has played almost 200 more minutes than him this season, and I believe that was in all competitions. And add to that the 90 minutes that he played against Crystal Palace. He played the entire game. So it makes me wonder like how far along Darwin Nunez is with his development. So I do think that him playing for the international team will help him. I don't think I share the same sentiment as he's going to get better. I have at this point I don't have any reason to believe that because he's not getting any game time. But it's a long season. There's a lot of games. I'm willing to be proven wrong, and I hope he does prove me wrong. I hope he does start scoring goals. But like 1 goal out of 9 shots, that's just not cutting it, man. That's not enough.
That's definitely his probably his biggest notch against him in the book. I'm on that party as well. His conversion rate for me is the most alarming stat, but we'll see. If he gets that right, he's doing a lot of other things right too. But CT, how do you feel about the injuries right now in the squad? We have Allison, as I said, might not be back until November. Chiesa looks like he's could potentially feature against Chelsea. Elliott's a surprising one that might be back towards late October. But so far, knock on wood, we've avoided injury curse that might have hit other players or other teams. How are you feeling about that Alisson injury and international breaks? Is there any fear over injury of players on that front?
Yeah, it's the style of play that Slot's playing. I feel better long term about that, like being helpful for avoiding more injuries. So I was feeling better about that. But then I was never gonna. It was hard to envision a season going by without us, picking up, these string of little injuries that happen all together at once. It seems, but yeah, we've started really well in the season, so I think that's a good sort of calming influence and remedy for some of these smaller injuries. But yeah, the depth is definitely going to get tested at times, and the games, the Champions League. Thankfully, we've got off to a better start there, and so we might be able to take the foot off the gas a little bit in one of the cup games as well. But in terms of the forward, six, I think we've got really good depth there, and I think I really want to see Chiesa up and firing, and I'm glad to hear that, as you mentioned, hopefully he's going to factor in really soon. I think in the midfield, all coming into the season, we all felt like there was a lot more sort of less talent available in terms of what Slot wants to play, in terms of depth, with the midfield area. And so, but look, Curtis Jones has been pretty solid when he's got his opportunities. I think, you got to give Endo some credit for the smaller role he played in the late game, at Palace. I think he could still do some jobs for us, although there is some reports and rumors out there that Liverpool might be cashing in on Endo in January. We'll see. But yeah, eventually some players are going to have to step up, or maybe Slot will have to really put his management skills to the test in terms of rearranging his plans a little, and putting a few different players in a few different spots and seeing if he can still get the same results. Um, but yeah, thankfully, Kanate has managed to avoid serious injuries. But yeah, to your question about Ellison, it's a trend. Definitely once or twice here and there, it's an outlier. But with Ellison, it seems to be a trend, and I think maybe the foresight, you got to give them credit in terms of getting the Marashvili deal over the line. In terms of, it had a lot of criticisms at the time and why they prioritized that deal. But at the end of the day, they knew that Queven Kelleher is, his days probably are numbered, and they needed to make backup plans, and they went out and they got him at an amazing fee, and that's going to just look even better as time goes by, doing that early bit of business that Edwards did with Marashvili. So I think he'll definitely come over next season. There won't be any need to loan him out for another season. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I read rumor that Martishvili, they might even pay another fee to potentially get him back in January. So that was something I was reading today. Dan's shaking his head. I think that's a bit jumping the gun, but yeah,
Yeah.
go for it, Dan.
No, I was gonna say, like, every player we've had that's been on loan for a year, we've never really paid for them to come back early. Origi was the same way back in 2014-15 when we bought him that summer, after we sold Suarez. We had bought Origi for that year, but he was still on loan at Lille, and people were saying, "Oh, we need to bring him back early because we didn't have a striker. We had Mario Balotelli and everything as well." I do think that having Georgi Mamardashvili is a very intuitive buy. I think that Alisson's a very interesting goalkeeper because he's not really the most fit, so to speak. If you notice how he always gets his injuries, it's always where he goes to kick with the outside of his foot, and it's usually always either it's always either his left foot, where he kicks through it, and he's not used to kicking it a lot, so he usually pulls it very easily, or it's the outside of his right foot. So Alisson has never really been the most fit goalkeeper. He's not Cristiano Ronaldo doing intense workouts to keep his body in tip-top shape. He loves a barbecue. He loves to spend time with his family. He's actually very much a throwback. I think he's a very throwback goalkeeper in the sense that he seems one who seems to like enjoy his time, enjoy his time away from training. And he will always it seems he has around a 10 to 15 pound weight that he adds on and drops every year as well. Listen, I think that Jaros is go ahead, CT.
Just to quickly, I was going to throw this at you, Dan, but if they find a move for Kelleher in January, could that then swing the momentum to get Gorgie in? Because if a team comes in for Kelleher, knowing that he's showcased himself a lot now too, I could see them getting a fee for that. Or would they run the gauntlet of half a season with just Jaros?
I mean, listen, like Allison hasn't had a season and has never had a season ending injury. He's always been out for, let's say, 2 to 3 weeks, so about 10 games, and he usually comes back from injury very quickly. I mean, even last week they thought he was going to be out for a little bit longer. Yeah, and obviously with playing with the ball at your feet, as a keeper, you need to have explosive movement, either laterally and vertically. So the type of muscle you're going to have is going to be different from someone who kicks the ball a lot. If you're thinking about a marathon runner versus a sprinter, you have different muscle tendons that you have, short versus long. You're in for power versus distance or endurance. So for goalkeepers, there is still a degree of skeletal muscularity percentage you need in order to maintain fitness. So you're right, Jay Musa, and I am interested to see what that'll be in the future. I think Jaros is good enough to be, the number 2 if they sold. So if Kelleher, let's say, let's say that Ipswich need a goalkeeper, and they're like, we're gonna spend X amount for Kelleher to go to Ipswich or insert another team here. I mean, I think he should go to Palace because, well, no, Palace has Dean Henderson. I'm trying to think. To use the team who has a crap. Oh, Flecken at Brentford. Let's say Brentford. Because I think Flecken's crap, and actually I think Brighton's goalkeeper is crap, and Chelsea's too, so to speak. Let's say one of them are like, let's get a goalkeeper in for I don't know, Liverpool price match 20, 25, 30 million. Kelleher goes. I think Jaros is perfectly capable of being the number 2 from January to May. Now, granted, do you want Jaros being your goalkeeper in a theoretical Champions League final? No, but if you have a fully fit team, the hope is that you wouldn't need to. And I don't think Jaros is worse than Mignolet or Loris Karius or any other goalkeepers we've had in the past. I think Jaros has shown that he's fully capable of being a number 2. I mean, you have to remember at what's the rest? Sturm Graz in Österreich, that he won the Österreich Bundesliga, so the league there and the League Cup. He did the league double at a team not named RB Salzburg. So he's technically he's a trophy winning goalkeeper for an Austrian team. And if you had told someone, hey, we bought this guy in for £5 million from Sturm Graz from Österreich, and you said like, oh, he's 23, he's won the league there, everyone would be excited, like, oh yeah, we're good. We don't need Kelleher. He's a backup goalkeeper. It's just because we spent so much money on Georgi Mamadashvili that people are theorizing for him to come back. I think that what Mamadashvili gives is time. So you can decide, do we go with Allison or do we extend Allison? Do we sell him? And Allison can make that decision himself with his injuries and where he wants to do with his career. And it can say, you can decide, oh, is Jaros good enough? Is Harvey Davies good enough? Or is Pitaluga good enough? Or is Mamadashvili the man to go? And I think they spent that money on Mamadashvili because they're like, this guy's clearly the best one right now available. And I think as we get him next year, we'll probably see that. Go ahead, Drew.
No, I was just gonna move on to the next stream, or the next topic. Probably one of our closing ones. I just wanted to get into the chat again. Thank you everyone for joining in, watching the stream. If you have any final thoughts and questions, please throw them in the chat. We'll bring them up. I'm going to bring up a comment from earlier in the stream from Jay. Jay said, seems like the schedule is going to get a bit harder to maintain. How would we rotate the midfield? Looking at the fixture list when we get back from international break, Toby, we're playing, let me bring this up. We're playing Chelsea on the October 20th, then RB Leipzig 23rd, Arsenal 27th, Brighton the 30th. That's just the end of October. That's in the span of 10 days. We have 4 games. And then you have another 3 games in 7 days with Brighton again in the league, Leverkusen, and Aston Villa. And that's the next chunk before we have it yet again, another international break. Do you think there are a lot of big games there. What for you is a success coming out of that fixture period? And do you see a lot of rotation in the midfield, addressing Jay's question? If so, how?
Yeah, so success or the most ideal the ideal situation would be win them all, right? But I'd say as far as league play go, I would like to take a look here. We got Chelsea, Arsenal. I think you could probably beat Chelsea. Arsenal's the one game I'm looking at that has caught my eye because they're one of the top 3 teams in the league. Brighton, we played them twice, both in the Carabao Cup and league play. Yeah, I don't think we're going to see a whole lot of rotating, considering that these are some big games coming up. I mean, sure, yes, it's early in the season, but you want to win some of these games, and I think there's a lot of question marks hanging over the team, considering that hey, they really haven't played a tough competition, or hey, they haven't played a top 6 team. So I think Liverpool have a point to make. I do see that first game against Brighton in the Carabao Cup where they do rotate, considering that I mean, it's not a big cup, let's put it that way, compared to the Champions League and league play. I do see a little rotation there, maybe even that second game against Brighton, but going forward, you got Chelsea, RB Leipzig, Arsenal. Just some big games coming up, and I would like to see the best starting 11 that Arne Slot can put out there.
He's definitely known for not making big changes. I'm curious for me, I think maybe left back. He seems to have, I know Robertson has picked up some injuries and Tsimikas is featured there. He's changed Gakpo out for Diaz as well. So maybe there's 1 or 2 here. The midfield for me, I know Dan will like this one, but I'll make him wait for CT to answer because I think Jones might be the one that we see alternating with Dom. But CT, how would you prioritize these matches? Because we're fighting on all fronts. And do you think it's just go for them as much as possible, like in terms of strongest 11 starts? Or are you seeing this is where Slot potentially gets to be a more architect type of manager in terms of picking and choosing his battles?
Yeah, it's a great question about prioritizing this different competitions, and I guess my personal overall philosophy is I would like to give my players confidence. One of the things that I've disagreed with, and there hasn't been many with Slot, is the opportunity to give some other guys maybe some more opportunities, Endo included. And I think when you wear that Liverpool shirt, one thing that Klopp did in an amazing way was give every player that stepped on the pitch, such confidence. He pumped them up, and he did that. Slot's a little bit different, and every manager is different, but we all saw the results and the fruits of the past. The League Cup night where kids stepped on the pitch and outplayed Chelsea. And I think if you just continue to be really hesitant giving players opportunities, some players are confidence players. Their confidence will suffer. So I'm a kind of fan that would love the coach to give the players the confidence. You can always make changes in the game, but give them opportunities. If it's League Cup, if it's a Prem game even. Rotate where you think you can in terms of, if you're signed by Liverpool Football Club, you're deemed at a level where you can do a job. It might not always be pretty, but you could do a job. So I would love to see Slot, trust a few guys. I mean, he seems to be pretty high on Morton and Trey Ione as well. There's no excuse to not play them in cup games, as well. So hopefully we don't. The other guys don't, pick up any injuries and all of that. So keep the main guys as fresh as you possibly can for those, do or die Prem clashes, and in the Champions League.
Yeah, it's I totally agree with you. And the word I really like to use is the trust. Like I think like seeing in Slot's interviews where he talks about team cohesion. For me, I agree with everything you said about Klopp and what he did for the players, and the moments that can lead to is like everyone feeling trusted, stepping up and beating that Chelsea team in the Carabao Cup final. I'm curious to see and hope he does trust his players in the games to come, because we're certainly going to need players to step up. And Dan, that'll lead me to you, get you to spotlight on this one. I think I'll know one of the answers on this, but who do you think are going to be the most important players coming through for this busy fixture period, and not only busy, but big fixture period after international break?
Oh wow, the easy question. For one, I think Gomez and Quansah are gonna be very important because we're gonna have to see how Slot does or does not rotate Van Dijk and Konate, though I imagine we'll see one or both of them being rotated and in the games as we go along. I'm just looking at their schedule right now. So we play 7 games in roughly 20 days. So very similar to the pack schedule we just had. 4 of which are at home, 3 are away. The 3 away games are RB Leipzig, Arsenal, and Brighton. Now, for all of those games, I would say the least important is obviously the Carabao Cup away to Brighton. You can rotate the team, and if you lose or go out on penalties, not the end of the world. Obviously, Slot won't think that way, neither the players will, but in the holistic viewpoint of the season, I think Arsenal is probably the most important game out of these, because if you can get a draw, you can walk in on that game, and if you get a draw, you've already done better than last year, and it's perfectly fine to get a draw away at the Emirates. It's not really a historically good hunting ground for Liverpool, so a draw is always a good result. Even during the time we won the league, we lost there like 2-1. I think that pretty much everyone outside of the starting 11 is going to be very important. So Gakpo, Nunez, Jones. I think this is kind of Jones's moment to shine. I think he's been solid every time he's started or has had to do significant minutes. I know that certain members of our chat are not as high on Jones as others. For whatever reason, it's just an irrational hate campaign at this point. I think that if Harvey Elliott can contribute, I think that he will be important as well, if nothing else, to give Dominic Szoboszlai minutes. And then with Wataru Endo, I mean, you can just saw from the Palace game, even if Wataru Endo doesn't get that many significant minutes, let's say for these 7 games, he gets maybe like 120 minutes overall, which would be, I think, like less than a game and a half, a game and a quarter, essentially, or a game and a third. Just his nous and his ability to read the game, and look at the Crystal Palace game, to handball it out for a throw in, and then Ismaila Sarr giving a foul throw. I mean, that's just genius. Like, that's Wataru. Listen, no, whatever everyone says about Wataru Endo, he knows the game. He knows ball. He would be the perfect Jose Mourinho player. I swear. Like he's just so smart and how to manage a very tough situation like that. Outside of those players, honestly, for me, the most important player that's going to come down to this period is, if I could summarize in 2 players, I know I mentioned a lot of people, but for me, what's going to define this era is 2 players, and that is Ryan Gravenberch and Virgil van Dijk. If both of them can keep up their form, we're going to get a decent amount of results. Obviously, like Toby mentioned, we want to win them all. We said the same thing at the beginning of the last international break, which I hosted. And then we lost the Forest, and then everyone lost their marbles, but we still won all the other games. I think that for me, because of where we are in the Champions League, if you don't get wins against Leverkusen and Leipzig, it's not the end of the world. As long as I think you don't lose in the league, I think that's the best potential answer. Even if you draw, even if you get some scrapey wins, it's more about not losing right now in the league. And the two players that are going to determine that is Ryan Gravenberch and Virgil Van Dijk, in my opinion. And that's who's going to carry us through this season, is can you keep those two players fit and firing, because they've been so crucial to this start.
Definitely, it's definitely have those wiggle room in the cup competitions, but 100% agree that have to get the league straightened and prioritized. Although, as Toby did say, I hope we do win 100% of them, because I want us to take every competition seriously, including the Carabao Cup. But I'll wrap up with one last question. I just want to say again, thank you to everyone joining the stream. Really appreciate everyone who watches these Star Stripes Anfield Night streams. And please answer this question if you'd like, because I'm curious to know your answers. I only ask this once a stream because I hope you enjoy the content first and foremost. But if you do like it, please like, share, and subscribe. It really does help the channel. And the question I'll close on, each of you can answer. We'll start with Toby. Who would you wrap in wool and make sure that they get through this international break safe and sound?
Man, I wish I could wrap up Allison, but that doesn't look like it's going to be happening. Sheesh. I'd probably say definitely Ryan Gravenberch. Hope that he can come back. As Dan said, he's the fulcrum of our team right now. He's basically kind of like the quarterback of our team. Not like in leadership way, but just as play goes. I would just like to see him come back in one piece, because we don't have a lot of depth in that area, and I'm not sure if we have a whole lot of players on the bench that could fill in for him if he did get injured.
Yeah, that's fair. Dan, I'm going to throw this quickly back to you. I know you said Gravenberch, Van Dijk, so I won't ask you that. But Jay Muse asked Marmouche, do you have any quick thoughts on that before we end? Sorry, Jay Muse. I know we said we'd address it.
I think Omar Marmouche is a decent player. I don't think he's Liverpool quality yet. I know people really rate him, but the fact that Tottenham Twitter Tacticos are already tweeting that he is the perfect Edge Postecoglou forward is already, for me, the biggest red flag in the world, considering that Edge Postecoglou's forwards include the likes of Timo Werner, Richarlison, and Dominic Solanke as well. So I think he's a good player. I don't think he's Liverpool quality yet. I think he can be in the future, but I think there's other options that they should look at in terms of forward positions.
All right. And CT, let's wrap it up with you. Who would you wrap in wool? Any different from the Gravenberch?
It's tough. Alexi McAllister is someone who, has been picking up some injuries, and I think he's so valuable because he can play in multiple positions, but forward, I really want to see him there long term. His creativity, I think, is key to breaking down low blocks and helping us score against, defensive-minded teams, but also in the double pivot with Ryan Gravenberch is so solid and so consistent as well. But he's a staple of the Argentina team and the World Cup winning team, and that just speaks to his quality and what he provides when he steps on the pitch. I mean, have you guys ever seen a player so upbeat as well? I don't know if you've really seen much of Alexi McAllister when he gives interviews, and when he's just such a polite, friendly, jovial person. He's just always smiling and laughing, and it just we're just lucky to have him.
His laugh is stuck in my head. He actually is spitting image and laugh of one of my friends. So it's this weird experience watching him give interviews. But CT, definitely appreciate that too. The idea of who's got a little bit of niggles on injuries and keeping them safe. For me, on that note, I'd say Kanate, because he's been absolutely immense. But that being said, wait, Dan, were you gonna say anything before?
No. I completely agree. I was just gonna say McAllister is the most important to keep because even though I mentioned those players, McAllister is just so good. Like it's hard to state just how good he is and how important he is. But no, I completely agree with CT.
Well said. And we'll wrap that up for tonight's stream. Again, thank you for everyone watching. Have a great rest of your evening. Have a great international break. Hopefully, good news. No bad news over the rest of the international break. And we'll see y'all next week.